second qualifier from Victoria, and car number 37 from position 2. Bob Tunks, third qualifier. ASAP Kurus in car number 54, accordingly from position 3. Steve Brazier from 4. Back then to Max Dumsney, locked in tight on the inside for the third row from position 5. Brett Lacey in the Australia 1 car from position 6. Dumsney and Lacey equal qualifiers from the third row. 25 laps the journey. The Danny Smith for the United States from the rear. Green flag flies. PCR, the action track, as the sprint cars form a wall of wings heading out of turn 2. And David Anderson from Victoria jumps out from position 2 as the race leader. And Ian Lewis, absolutely incredible stuff, but Ian Lewis keeps the car racing. Superb drive from the Victorian, but David Anderson now races down into turn 4 with Gary Rush tucked in behind in second hand. Here comes Steve Brazier. This is PCR, this is the action track. Brazier ranges up on the inside of Rush, wheel to wheel. Anderson still calling the shots up front as Rush backs it off turn 4. Brazier the next one too. Then comes Max Dumsney. Bob Tunks, Barry Lewis, Sid Moore followed up by Brett Lacey. Fighting his way through from the back of the pack is the American Danny Smith. This is a program 25-lap journey at Australia's premier sprint car track as Rush and Brazier still battle wheel to wheel, but it's Anderson already up onto the first of the tail enders. David Anderson goes up on the high line, Rush in hot pursuit. The immaculate PCR Clayway giving 100% traction tonight at PCR. David Anderson still up front. The young red-headed charger out of Albury-Wodonga. Oh, and Anderson's upended. David Anderson coming together with Bruce White. Anderson flying through the down cars. Came up to Bruce White, just touched the number 96 car, and Anderson hooked up on the tacky top and inverted the Victoria number 37 car. And it looks like the young Victorian may be hurt there.
I tell you what, Al, he could have just hurt his wrist there. He's just banging the steering wheel with disappointment. He's really disgruntled in the car. He's shaking his head. He's thumping the dashboard, the steering wheel. What a disappointment, because Anderson missed the jump at the start. Gary Rush, the pole man, he sets the pace. He jumped on it just right in the apex there at turn number 3. He had the jump, and Anderson came from the on the outside around Rush and into the race lead, so he did a great job. Put your hands together for the driver out of Albury-Wodonga, as Al calls it, and the poor guy, so disappointed. Great race, he was leading in great pace up on the slow cars, and it's a lottery when you get in the down cars. And David Anderson, such a really nice guy to have around to talk to, one of the most pleasant guys to talk to in Speedway, David Anderson, his wife Barbara and family here tonight, and I bet they're totally disappointed with what's happened here in turn 4. Early laps of the feature race, but David Anderson had his mark on it.
Certainly did, Stuart. It really is a tragedy, because even though David considers himself a Victorian, he just loves the PCR track, and he has turned in some tremendous drives here on previous occasions. But this weekend has been the best we've ever seen David Anderson. He has been in first class form, and he has just been so fast. He dominated his heat racing, and tonight grabbing position 2 alongside Gary Rush, and you don't do that too easily at Parramatta City Raceway. So folks, he's got his helmet off now. The cars are over the back. Will you put your hands together one more time for David Anderson? A bit of blow to the young red-headed Victorian, but David will be the first to admit that's just the way it goes. That's racing. A corny phrase, but it's so true in sprint car racing, particularly here at Parramatta City Raceway. And to lead the field away is one G. Rush in the Winfield, a number 2 car. But the pressure now on with a long-time track rival and a great friend, Steve Brazier, in the number 58 car. And the two drivers up there between them have some 9 Australian championships between the two. Gary Rush, 7 times Oz champ, and Steve Brazier with 2 incredible back-to-back wins a couple of seasons ago. And the two drivers now running 1 and 2. And this should be what should develop into an awesome battle on the clayway tonight.
Yeah. And in third position is Max Dumsney, whose car comes from Victoria, and Max now lives in Northmead. Now, we just talked about David Anderson coming from behind to pass Rush at the start there, and we don't see that too often here at PCR, and there's 2 guys right on his hammer that can probably do it. Now, if you toss your eyes and memories back a few years, Max Dumsney, an unknown at that stage, beat Gary Rush here in the King of the Clay series about 5 to 6 seasons ago. 4 to 5 seasons back now, I'd say, Al. And he came from behind to beat Gary Rush in that. So that surprised a lot of people, including Gary Rush.
And if we go a little further back down the pack, there's another Australian champion by way of Bob Tunks in the ASAP Couriers car. And Bob Tunks is one of the few drivers to go around the outside of Gary Rush on turn 4. Yep. That also happened only 2 seasons back, but that was one of the drives at Parramatta City Raceway. As you say, you just don't go around Gary Rush easy, certainly not on the outside, and Bob Tunks is one of the few drivers to complete the feat. So at this stage, even though Gary Rush off pole position, there's still a multitude of drivers in this field that can not only stay with Gary Rush, but also on the night pass him. But Gary Rush is going to take the jump as the green comes out. Steve Brazier's there also as they race onto the main straight away. Away goes Rush. Brazier throws the tail in on the inside. Oh, Brazier's matching the horsepower of Rush as they head from 2 down the back section. Dumsley the big danger in third, back to Bob Tunks. Power him under the PCR clayway now as Rush goes on the high line. Brazier finds a drive. There's drive all over the circuit, and Brazier's using it. High line, low line, centre circuit. Looks for the inside of Rush now as they race off turn 4. At the action track, Brazier looks for the inside run again, but Rush matches him wheel to wheel now as Denny Smith off the circuit on the main straightaway. Slingshot powers his way back on, but the young American has a long haul ahead of him as Gary Rush sets up the absolutely dynamic run on the high line, running away. Rush, Brazier and Max Dumsley, 1, 2 and 3 at PCR. Leading the 1986-87 Goodyear New South Wales Sprintcar Championship final from Steve Brazier and Max Dumsley. Brazier again on the inside and Rush shuts the gate. Dynamic racing from the true champions of the sport on the PCR clayway. Rush now gets by Bruce White. Brazier only a breath away. Max Dumsley losing some ground and Dumsley's out. Max Dumsley is out as Bob Tunks inherits third place and Denny Smith in position 4. 15 laps completed. Only 10 remaining at PCR, and again Steve Brazier with a relentless chase, and Brazier goes by Gary Rush. Steve Brazier goes to the lead. Rush fights again on the inside, but there's clouds of blue smoke from Brazier. Clouds of blue smoke from Steve Brazier, but it's still the race leader. Can Brazier go the distance to pick up the New South Wales title? With 1/3 of the distance remaining, Danny Smith from the United States takes over third now. Bob Tunks relegated to 4th. But Brazier, blue smoke pouring from the 58 car, keeps the right foot hard in the bucket as only Steve Brazier can. Races up quickly on turn 3. Brazier dusting off these tail enders now. Gary Rush calling on more horsepower, but he can't match Steve Fraser, it would seem, at this stage. Only a handful of laps remaining. And now with 20 laps completed and only 5 remaining, but Steve Fraser in full flight, 2 times champion of Australia, and now heading only 4 1/4 laps away from the New South Wales Championship at PCR. Gary Rush on the low line gets the drive. Fraser, Rush and Smith, 1, 2 and 3. After a moment of problems with Rob Rudley, but Fraser goes through, backs the car up through turns 1 and 2. Oh, Danny Smith walking right up tight in full chase of Gary Rush. White flag out for Steve Fraser with 24 laps completed. 1 remaining now, and Danny Smith. Oh, and Gary Rush halfway round, and Smith goes to second. Steve Fraser is the New South Wales champion. Danny Smith second, Gary Rush third.
Oh, championship race, championship. The New South Wales Sprint Car Championship goes to Steve Brazier in car number 58. What a drive. Excellent drive, the tacky top. Oh, electricity running up through here, I tell you. What sensational sprint car racing we've seen tonight. To David Anderson, our commiserations for such bad luck on the early laps when it led so well. What a climax to a sprint car feature race with Steve Brazier coming through in the 58 car. Well done, Steve Brazier. Gary Rush hounding all the way. What a great championship effort he put in, Gary Rush, in the number 2 car. And then from 17th starting position in the pack, and on the last lap to grab second place, Danny Smith. What a drive, Danny Smith. Stay with us for trophy presentation time and cheer these drivers and give them the cheer that they deserve. Wow, that's sprint car racing, that's championship stuff here at PCR. We'll be crossing trackside pretty soon to track announcer Alan Edworthy, who has got a great job ahead of him to talk to 3 fantastic drivers here at PCR and around the tracks of Australia and the world. Gary Rush, 7-time national champion, did so well here in the championship tonight. Steve Brazier coming from in the second row, hounded Rush the whole way through until he could get that break. The cars were so equal that at one stage Steve Brazier ran up a little bit too high in turn 4 and lost about 4 or 5 car lengths, and it took him about that many laps to get that distance back again. And then he powered through underneath Gary Rush down here in the turns 1 and 2 to go on to take the championship. Steve Brazier won the New South Wales Super Modified Championship, and I'm not going to guess the year, but it was a lot of years ago. In 1972, it just flashed back to me thanks to Dennis Newland, and 1972, Steve Brazier in his modified in those days, winning that championship, and here it is, 1986, just around the corner from 1987. So Danny Smith, he had to work his tail off also in the Dennis Farr car. Old Rambo's prepared it really well for him to step off the plane today. 3 o'clock Danny Smith arrived in Australia, and not only the hassle of going through Australian customs, but he had to get himself here and test out a new ride. As he told us earlier in the pits tonight, he's had 21 different race cars under him this summer in the United States at 94 race meetings. So that's what versatility does when it comes to jumping in and out of race cars. So to 3 great drivers, And of course Bob Tunks, who put in a great effort to come into 4th position as well. Can't forget Bob Tunks in his effort for the championship. And it looks like we're ready to go trackside to Alan Edworthy's pardon his voice, because he was pretty excited in that call. It was a great call, it was a great championship, and it's down to you, Al.
Thanks indeed, Stuart. Well, once again, superb sprint car action at PCR, the premier sprint car track in the nation, and I think tonight's New South Wales Championship final couldn't have demonstrated it better. Superb action, 25 laps of the best at PCR, and that's the way it should be, and this our 10th anniversary of speed here at PCR, the action track. And what a way to celebrate it tonight with the New South Wales Championship final with the finest drivers in the nation, and including Danny Smith from the United States. And if we're going to talk the finest drivers in the nation, certainly one of the best tonight. Running up in 4th place, folks, will you put your hands together, one of the true chargers in the nation, Mr. Bob Tunks. A great drive from Bob, and looked a certain placing, at least in the major placings, but that wasn't to be tonight at PCR. But Bob, it's always great to have you up here at presentation time, and welcome back to the microphone, Bob Tunks.
Thanks very much, Ollie. I'd firstly like to congratulate Steve. It was a brilliant drive from where I sat. He was just too good for everybody. Secondly, I'd like to thank the sponsors, ASAP Couriers and Toddy's Tyres. Without them, we probably wouldn't have been kicked off this season. Probably the most important guy of the lot's Ivan Walker. That motor I got in that car is 3 years old and it's still working good, and it's 70-something meetings it's got on it, and that's full credit to Ivan and nobody else. To the boys and the crew, to Andrew Goodall, my son Grant, to Robert, Lloyd, Graham Darley, Meathead, all the rest of them. There's too many of them to mention. They do all the work, we get all the glory. Thanks, fellas.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again for Mr. Bob Tunks, 4th in the Goodyear Championship final of New South Wales. A man who was top qualifier. He's won 2 dramatic main events this season at the Parramatta City Raceway. Honked his way all the way through the heats to grab pole position. Jumped out of pole behind David Anderson, the young Victorian. Racing away at the green to lead this man down the back section for the first occasion. We saw Anderson to Myers, and then Gary Rush driving his heart out to be passed by only 2 drivers. But the man finishing 3rd tonight, that'll do, says Gary. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Gary Rush. Good on you, Gary, on behalf of Goodyear Tyre and Brake Service. Welcome back to the microphone, and it's certainly what looked to be a certain New South Wales Championship, but as you said, 2 cars, that's too many.
No, there's no certain races. You know, you've seen what happened to young David Anderson, but he was going pretty quick. But Steve Brazier's going quicker, a lot quicker, and good luck to him, you know. Yep. And well, what do you say? I'm not fast enough, you know. But anyway, thanks for coming, everyone. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Gary Rush, 3rd place in the title. A man who hails from Danville in Indiana. He's had over 24 hours on a Boeing aircraft, or several Boeing aircrafts. He arrived in Australia at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Hopped into the race car to complete a couple of laps behind the final qualifying heats to step into a race car, although it's not a strange car to Danny Smith. It's a car that has been a long time out of the saddle of, to finish up in 2nd place tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, will you welcome back to Australia and back to PCR, Mr. Danny Smith. Danny, welcome back to Australia, welcome back to PCR. Already a 2 times New South Wales champion, and running up in 2nd place tonight. Danny, it's great to have you back in the land of Oz. Welcome back once again.
Thank you. It's good to be back here at my favourite racetrack in Australia.
It's pretty fast tonight.
Yeah, the track was pretty good. It was greasy earlier, and it ended up for a good show later on. And I'm always glad to get second, starting in the back and chasing the fast guys down. So then maybe come back next time and win one.
Were you worried about the jet lag, or it doesn't affect you now? You've flown across the Pacific that many times between Sydney and Los Angeles. It's almost becoming second nature to you.
I am a little tired, but you know, it's worth it. I love racing sprint cars, and it's worth it.
Okay, Danny, we're going to see quite a lot of you, and particularly at Parramatta this season. Once again, congratulations on your brilliant second placing, and welcome back to PCR, Danny Smith.
Okay, thank you.
Danny Smith, ladies and gentlemen, from Danville in Indiana, from the United States of America. A man who has won 2 Australian titles, those titles back to back, and as Stuart informed you earlier, he last won the New South Wales Championship in 1972, and in fact it was at the Liverpool City Raceway, and it was some 14 years ago. And here on his home track is a man who's recorded unofficially 13.1 seconds for one lap of PCR. The existing lap record is 13.64, and tonight he stands as the New South Wales champion, the champion driver in New South Wales. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Mr. Steve Brazier. We use the word steaming for Steve because that's how you describe a freight train. And right up the front is that engine, and right up the front tonight was Mr. Steve Brazier. Puts a New South Wales championship under his belt, one of the fastest men ever to circulate round here at the Clayway. Ladies and gentlemen, one more time for Mr. Steve Brazier. Good on you, Steve. Absolutely incredible stuff. The race fans were with you all the way out there on the 25-lap journey. It looked a little dicey in the early stages, but you came through, sliced away through the traffic, and as we had seen, got past Gary and the rest of the guys. Danny Smith set sail, but it was all too late. Steve Brazier was home and home. His New South Wales title after 14 long years.
Well, let me tell you, Ollie, yes, Gary held me up for a little while there. He's pinched me a bit tight coming out of 2. But I've got one big advantage on all the other guys. I'm running a Felsh engine. You know, they don't make no fancy horsepower figures, but they get the job done on the racetrack. I think it's the engine that gets me to the winning post most of the time.
Well, Steve, it was, I know you're a little tongue-tied there, let me tell you. I would be too after 25 of the fastest laps we've ever seen at PCR for quite some time at any rate. But I know you're not finished yet, Steve. We'll be doing a lot of talking because there's a lot of fans who want to hear what you've got to say tonight. But all I would like to say on behalf of the race fans here at PCR, the promotion, and of course the Goodyear Tyre and Brake people, welcome back as New South Wales champ.
The other thing I'd like to say, you know, I was a little bit mad tonight. They didn't let me run last night. They said I was too noisy. There was a couple of decibels over. And when the guys do that to you, it just makes you all the more keen to put it on them. And the more they do it, the more I'm going to put it on them. And I hope they keep on doing it. I'd also like to thank Colin Halbert from Cairns Carmart. He's one of my sponsors. Metro Tyres, another sponsor. The head crewman, Phil Johnson, he does one hell of a job. I'd say he's almost as good as Johnny Barrett right now. And the rest of me crew, Ian McGee, AJ, my helmet man, my young son Stephen, Gary, sorry. And also I'd like to thank Goodyear too. Without them people we wouldn't be racing here, I don't think. Thank you, Ollie.
You're welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, one final time for Mr. Steve Brazier. Superb sprint car main event tonight, the championship. Congratulations to Steve Brazier, Danny Smith, Gary Rush and Bob Tunks. And Danny will be back with us next Friday night for the Shelley's Sprint Car Cup.